Proton pump inhibitors, or PPIs, are a class of drugs that reduce the amount of acid made by the stomach. Commonly prescribed PPIs include Prilosec, Zegerid, Prevacid, Protonix, Acefex, Nexium, Capodex, and Dexalon. Proton pump inhibitors are used for the treatment of acid reflux, gastroesophageal reflux disease, heartburn, esophagitis, or inflammation of the throat, stomach ulcers, and a bacterial infection in the stomach called Helicobacter pylori, which can cause ulcers. PPIs are also used for prevention of stomach ulcers caused by non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. When we take a medication, we usually take for granted that it will work. In reality, there is a lot that goes into how your body responds to a medication. PPI drugs are processed by the CYP2C19 enzyme. The CYP2C19 gene tells the body how to make the CYP2C19 enzyme. Variants in the CYP2C19 gene can determine how quickly or slowly you break down a PPI drug. When a PPI drug is broken down more slowly, it stays in the body longer and works better. When a PPI drug is broken down more quickly, it is not in the body as long and may not work as well. Each gene associated with drug metabolism is expected to have multiple sites of variation. Proton pump inhibitor drug response is determined by a combination of genetic variants, or SNPs, in the CYP2C19 gene. Each combination of genetic variants is called a haplotype. There can be many different combinations of variants for each gene. To help identify the different combinations, a numbering system is sometimes used. In the example, one combination of variants in the CYP2C19 gene may be called star 6, while another is called star 8. The DNA sequence that makes an enzyme with normal or typical function is usually called star 1. Since we have two copies of each gene, one from mom and one from dad, each person will have a combination of variants, called a haplotype, from each parent. When genetic testing is performed, the results are noted as two numbers, one representing each combination of variants in that gene, separated by a slash. For example, someone who has inherited the combination of variants from their father, known as star 6, and the combination known as star 8 from their mother, would be a star 6/star 8 for the gene tested. Some people have combinations of variants that are rare and have not been studied or named, and sometimes the genetic test that is performed cannot determine a person's result with certainty. Haplotypes, or combinations of genetic variants, can be used to predict a person's CYP2C19 enzyme activity level. For example, someone with a star 6/star 8 haplotype would be predicted to have reduced CYP2C19 activity level and would be a poor metabolizer. Based on your genetic result, you will be placed into a predicted CYP2C19 activity level category and given a corresponding CYP2C19 PPI metabolizer status. Individuals with reduced CYP2C19 activity are either poor metabolizers or intermediate metabolizers. Those with typical enzyme activity are extensive metabolizers, and those with increased CYP2C19 activity are called ultra-rapid metabolizers. In some cases, there is not enough data to predict a metabolizer status. Individuals predicted to be a CYP2C19 poor metabolizer are expected to respond very well to a standard dose of a proton pump inhibitor drug. This is because slower processing allows more time for the drug to work. Intermediate metabolizers are also expected to respond well to a standard dose of a PPI. Individuals with typical CYP2C19 enzyme activity are expected to respond to a standard dose of a PPI, while those with increased CYP2C19 enzyme activity are less likely to respond to a standard dose of a PPI. This is because the drug is processed more quickly and has less time to work. A higher dose may be needed for an ultra-rapid metabolizer to benefit from a PPI drug. Your predicted CYP2C19 enzyme activity level may be useful to your healthcare provider in making decisions about the dose that you will need of a proton pump inhibitor drug. It is important to keep in mind that the assigned CYP2C19 activity level is based only on your genetic results. Other information, such as your age, weight, or other medications, may determine the dose and type of drug that you are prescribed. In some cases, genetic testing provides information to help determine the CYP2C19 enzyme activity level, such as reduced CYP2C19 activity, but the specific metabolizer type, poor or intermediate, cannot be predicted. In other rare cases, the CPMC will not be able to predict a CYP2C19 activity level due to a technical limitation in the testing process. Your personal CPMC results will show how common each CYP2C19 activity level is in your racial or ethnic group. You can view this information in your report by clicking on the About tab and then the How Common tab. Information is not available for all racial or ethnic groups. If data is not available for your race or ethnicity, your report will include information for the Caucasian population. In addition to your genes, how your body metabolizes PPIs may prevent other drugs that you take from working effectively and may increase the risk of side effects associated with these other drugs. Taking a PPI with the following drugs may reduce the benefit of the non-PPI drug or may increase the risk for side effects from the non-PPI drug. It is important that you talk to your healthcare providers about all of the medications and supplements that you are taking, as they may interact with proton pump inhibitor drugs. Do not make changes to any medications without talking to your healthcare providers. In addition to proton pump inhibitors, your genetic results for CYP2C19 can affect your response to other drugs. Different drugs can be processed in different ways by the body. Some drugs are activated by the CYP2C19 enzyme, while other drugs are broken down and removed from the body by the CYP2C19 enzyme. Because of these differences, the metabolizer status does not always predict the same response for all drugs, even when those drugs are metabolized by the same gene. For example, a person who is a CYP2C19 poor metabolizer may not respond to the antiplatelet drug Plavix and would be at increased risk for blood clots, heart attack, or stroke if they were to continue taking a standard dose. This is because the CYP2C19 enzyme activates Plavix. Reduced CYP2C19 enzyme activity means that less of the drug is activated, leading to a poor response. An alternative antiplatelet treatment would be recommended for this individual. However, this same CYP2C19 poor metabolizer would be expected to respond very well to a proton pump inhibitor drug. This is because the CYP2C19 enzyme removes proton pump inhibitor drugs from the body. A CYP2C19 poor metabolizer will remove proton pump inhibitor drugs at a very slow rate, allowing more time for the drug to work before being removed. As usual, there will be a lot of information in your CPMC results. Some of it will be general information, and some of it will be personalized to you based on your genetic test results. The About tab provides general information. The Results tab contains what we found in your DNA, and an interpretation of how your result impacts your CYP2C19 enzyme activity level and whether or not you are expected to respond well to a PPI drug, or if you may need a different dose of a PPI drug. The CPMC tests for 10 variants in the CYP2C19 gene. Each variant tested is listed by its RS number. This is the number used by scientists to name genetic variants. In the second column, you will find your results highlighted in yellow. Because we have 2 copies of every gene, one from mom and one from dad, everyone tested will have 2 results represented by letters for each variant tested. In the last column, we give the reference value or expected result. Above the table, we provide the name for your combined genetic result. In some cases, your combined genetic result may be uncertain. See the Your Result Interpretation tab for information about how your combination of genetic variants impacts your expected CYP2C19 enzyme activity level and whether or not you are expected to respond well to a proton pump inhibitor drug. For some results, we will not be able to provide an interpretation. It is important to note that CPMC testing alone cannot fully predict your response to PPIs or any other type of drug. Other factors like your weight, gender, race, other health conditions, and other medications may also influence the way a person will respond to proton pump inhibitor drugs, as well as other drugs. It is possible that you may have other genetic variants that occur in the CYP2C19 gene that are not tested by the CPMC. Also, it is possible that you may have variants in other genes that influence your response to PPIs. In some cases, the CYP2C19 metabolizer status on your proton pump inhibitor report will be different than the CYP2C19 metabolizer status on your Plavix report. This may be due to differences in available research literature to help make CYP2C19 metabolizer predictions for a given drug, or, in some cases, due to differences that occur because of the inclusion of 2 additional genetic variants in the CYP2C19 gene that were necessary to determine your predicted response to PPI drugs. For an explanation of why your CYP2C19 metabolizer status may be different for different drugs, contact a CPMC genetic counselor at cpmcgc@coriel.org or call 888-580-8028. For more information about your CPMC PPI drug response results, consider sharing your CPMC results with your healthcare provider or contact a CPMC genetic counselor. You can also read the information provided on the CPMC Health Education page.